The only place her dog refused to step was exactly where he started digging. The pen barely made a sound when Elena signed her name. 33 years, gone in a quiet room that smelled like old paper and coffee. By sunset, everything she had built belonged to someone else. Except for one thing, a forgotten piece of land in the desert. And 3 days later, her German shepherd refused to leave a single patch of dirt. What would you have done the moment that dog started digging? The office was smaller than Elena expected. Not the kind of place where a life ended. A narrow room, beige walls that had yellowed at the corners, a metal filing cabinet with one drawer that didn't quite close. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and something chemical, cleaner maybe. The kind used at the end of the day, when everything was supposed to be wiped down and forgotten. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Click, click, click. Elena Vargas sat upright in a chair that felt too low, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had worn a navy blouse, one she used to save for family gatherings. It didn't fit quite the same anymore. The sleeves hung loose at the wrists. Across the desk, the lawyer spoke in a steady voice. Words like transfer, allocation, final agreement. Elena heard them, but they didn't land. Not really. To her right, Victor shifted in his chair. The movement was small, impatient. He glanced at his watch, then at his phone, then back at the papers. He hadn't looked at her once since they sat down. 33 years, and now this. Mrs. Vargas, the lawyer said gently, sliding a page forward. This is the final signature. Elena nodded. She didn't trust her voice. The pen was heavier than she expected, cold in her hand. For a moment, she just held it there, above the line where her name had already been printed. Elena M. Vargas. It looked official, like it belonged to someone else. She glanced up just once. Victor was already signing his copy. His handwriting hadn't changed. Still sharp, still quick, like he had somewhere else to be. He didn't pause, didn't hesitate, just signed and slid the paper back. Done. Elena lowered her eyes again. The fan above her clicked. Click, click, click. She thought about the house. The one with the pale blue shutters she painted herself one summer while Victor was away on a business trip. The kitchen tiles she scrubbed on her knees every Sunday morning. The small crack in the hallway wall they never fixed. That house would still be there tomorrow, just without her. The residence, the lawyer continued, remains under Mr. Vargas's sole ownership. Victor gave a small nod, like confirming an order. The retirement account, also his. The savings, his. The words kept coming. They all ended the same way. His. Elena didn't interrupt, didn't argue. There had been a time months ago when she tried, when she stayed up late at the kitchen table, going over numbers, thinking there had to be some mistake. There wasn't. Everything had been arranged carefully, quietly. By the time she understood, it was already done. The property outside Marfa, the lawyer said, flipping a page, will remain under your name, Mrs. Vargas. Elena blinked. That piece of land. She hadn't thought about it in years. Just dry ground her father left behind. A place Victor used to joke about at dinner. Your father's great investment, he would say, smiling at guests. A pile of dirt nobody wanted. Elena never laughed. Now it was the only thing left. Yes, she said softly. Her voice surprised her. It sounded steady. The lawyer gave a polite nod, then tapped the final line. Right here. Elena lowered the pen. For a second, her hand trembled. Just slightly. Enough that she noticed. enough that she tightened her grip. Then she signed. Slow, careful. Each letter forming exactly the way she'd written it her entire life. When she finished, she placed the pen down with both hands, gently, as if it mattered. Silence filled the room. The lawyer gathered the papers, aligning the edges. "That concludes the proceedings," he said. Victor stood immediately. His chair scraped against the floor with a sharp, final sound. Elena stayed seated for a moment longer. Not because she needed to, because standing felt like something that required effort, like stepping into a life she hadn't agreed to. She finally rose. Her knees felt stiff. Not from age, from stillness. Victor was already at the door, checking his phone again. "Take care," he said. It wasn't unkind. It just wasn't anything. Elena looked at him. Really looked. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, his hair thinner at the temples. A man she had once known in ways no one else ever did. Now standing there like a stranger waiting for an elevator, she opened her mouth. There were things she could have said, about the years, about the quiet dinners, about everything they built that didn't seem to count anymore. Instead, she nodded. "Goodbye, Victor." He gave a brief nod in return. Then he was gone. Just like that. The hallway outside felt brighter. Too bright. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. Voices echoing faintly from other offices. Elena walked down the corridor slowly, her shoes making soft, steady sounds against the tile. At the front desk, a woman offered a polite smile. "Have a good day." Elena smiled back. Because that's what you do, and outside the heat wrapped around her immediately. San Antonio in the afternoon. The kind of heat that presses down, even in November. The air smelled like asphalt and distant traffic. Her SUV was parked across the street. Old. Dust along the sides. A small dent near the rear door that Victor had always meant to fix. She stood there for a moment. Not moving. People passed her. Cars rolled by. Somewhere a siren wailed and faded. Everything kept going. Exactly the same. Elena walked to the driver's side and opened the door. Inside, 2 suitcases sat in the back seat. One navy, one brown. That was it. 33 years, reduced to what she could carry. She slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. The sound was louder than it should have been. Final. She rested her hands on the steering wheel, didn't start the engine, just sat there. The steering wheel was warm from the sun. The dashboard cracked slightly along the edge. A faint smell of old upholstery and something familiar, her own perfume maybe, lingering in the fabric. For the first time that day, she felt it. Not anger, not sadness, something quieter, like a space inside her had been cleared out, like a room where everything had been taken away, and nothing put back. She looked ahead. The road stretched out in front of her, open, uncertain, empty. Elena turned the key. The engine started on the second try. She didn't look back at the building. There was nothing left there for her. She put the car in drive and pulled away. Without a sound. Without a scene. Just gone. The city fell away faster than Elena expected. 1 minute, traffic lights and storefronts. The next, long stretches of road with nothing but faded billboards and sun-bleached fences. She kept both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, as if looking anywhere else might pull her back. The radio was off. It had been off for a long time. The silence inside the SUV felt thick at first, then normal, then necessary. She passed the grocery store she used to stop at every Thursday. The gas station where Victor liked to complain about prices. A small diner on the corner where they had eaten breakfast once a month, always sitting in the same booth. She didn't slow down, didn't turn her head. Those places didn't belong to her anymore. The highway stretched west, straight and flat. Heat shimmered in the distance, bending the horizon just enough to make it look unreal. Elena drove, mile after mile. At some point, she noticed her hands had relaxed on the wheel. Not loose, just less tight. She hadn't eaten since morning, but the thought didn't come with hunger. Just a quiet acknowledgement, like remembering to blink. A green sign appeared ahead. Marfa, 87 miles. She hadn't seen that name in years. Her father used to say it with a kind of quiet pride, like it meant something more than a dot on a map. Back then, she never asked why. Now, it was the only place she had left. The highway narrowed after a while. The traffic thinned until there was no one else around. Just her car, the sound of the engine, and the steady rhythm of tires on pavement. The sky opened wider, endless. She rolled the window down an inch. Warm air rushed in, carrying dust and the faint scent of dry earth. It settled into the car quickly, clinging to the fabric seats, to her clothes, to her skin. It felt different out here. Not quieter, just emptier. After another hour, the road shifted again. Pavement turned to rougher asphalt, then to gravel. The sound changed, soft hum to sharp crunch beneath the tires. Elena slowed the car instinctively. A wooden post stood off to the side, barely upright. No sign, no markings, just something left behind long enough to stop meaning anything. She recognized it anyway. This was the turn. She eased the SUV onto the narrow path, the wheels kicking up a light trail of dust behind her. The road, if it could still be called that, curved slightly, weaving through low brush and scattered mesquite trees. The land stretched out on both sides, flat, dry, unforgiving. She hadn't been here in over 10 years, not since her father's funeral. Even then, she hadn't stayed long. The path grew rougher the further she drove. Small rocks knocked against the underside of the car. Branches brushed lightly along the sides, leaving faint scratching sounds that came and went. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the ground. And then she saw it. The structure. It stood alone, slightly tilted, as if the earth beneath it had shifted and never quite settled again. The wood was faded gray, cracked from years of heat. The roof sagged in the middle, one corner patched with something that looked like rusted sheet metal. It wasn't a house, not really. More like something that had once tried to be. Elena slowed the SUV to a stop a few yards away. She didn't get out right away, just sat there, engine idling, looking at it through the windshield. This was it. Everything she had. She turned the engine off. Silence returned, deeper now without the hum of the motor. For a moment, she listened. Wind moved through the brush, a low, constant sound, like something whispering just out of reach. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, then nothing. No neighbors, no passing cars, no voices. Elena opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit her first. Not sharp, but heavy. It settled on her shoulders, pressing down gently but persistently. She closed the door behind her and stood there, taking it in. The ground beneath her shoes was dry, packed hard with cracks running through it like thin lines on old paper. A few stubborn plants clung to life around the edges, their leaves pale and brittle. She walked toward the structure slowly. Each step felt louder than it should have been. The front door hung slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness inside. One hinge squeaked faintly as the wind nudged it. Elena stopped a few feet away. She didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, she turned and looked back at the SUV. The two suitcases sat in the back seat, visible through the glass. That was everything she had brought with her. Everything she had left. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The air tasted dry, not unpleasant, just different. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pale gold. Shadows stretched longer across the ground, reaching toward her feet. Elena walked back to the SUV, opened the driver's door, sat down. She didn't turn the key, didn't reach for the suitcases. Instead, she leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. The quiet settled around her again. Not heavy this time. Just there. Outside, the wind moved through the land like it had been doing for years, before her and long after. Elena stayed in the car as the light faded. She didn't go inside. Not that night. When darkness finally settled over the desert, it came quickly. The sky turned deep blue, then black, scattered with stars that seemed closer than they should be. She reached forward and turned the key just enough to power the radio. Static filled the space for a moment. Then nothing. No stations. No voices. She turned it off again. The silence returned. Elena shifted in the seat, pulling her bag closer from the passenger side. She didn't bother reclining fully, just enough to ease the pressure on her back. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dark. The outline of the structure was still visible through the windshield. Waiting. Unchanged. She watched it for a while, then stopped. There was no point. She closed her eyes again. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was the wind. Steady. Endless. Like the land itself was breathing. And for the first time that day, she didn't feel like she had somewhere else to be. Just somewhere she had arrived, even if she didn't yet know what that meant. Morning came without ceremony. No alarm. No noise. Just light. It slipped through the windshield in thin, pale streaks, warming the inside of the SUV inch by inch. Elena opened her eyes slowly, her neck stiff from the angle she had slept in. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the horizon. Flat, endless, empty. And it came back all at once. She sat up, wincing slightly as her back protested. The air inside the car was already warm, carrying the dry scent of dust and sun-baked vinyl. She reached for the door handle and stepped outside. The desert looked different in the morning. Less harsh. Still quiet, but not as heavy. A faint breeze moved through the brush, carrying a soft, rustling sound. Somewhere far off, a bird called, sharp and brief. Elena stretched her arms slowly, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders, the weight of the day ahead already settling in. She turned toward the structure, still there, still waiting, unchanged. She walked halfway toward it this time, close enough to see the cracks in the wood more clearly, the way the door hung unevenly on its hinges, close enough to smell the faint scent of dry rot mixed with something older. Earth, maybe, trapped inside. But again, she didn't go in. Not yet. Instead, she turned back toward the SUV, opened the back door, and reached for one of the suitcases. That's when she noticed it. A shape in the shade beside the vehicle. Still. Watching. Elena froze. For a second, her mind didn't place it. Just a form against the ground. Then the ears lifted slightly. A dog. The German Shepherd. He hadn't made a sound, hadn't approached. He was just there. The same dog from the roadside yard. Dust still clung to his coat. dulling what might have once been a deep, rich color. One ear bent slightly at the tip, and there was a faint scar along his side, just visible when the light hit it right. His eyes were open, fixed on her. Not aggressive, not afraid, just steady. Elena let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You stayed," she said quietly. Her voice sounded different out here, softer, like the land absorbed anything too sharp. The dog didn't move, didn't wag his tail, didn't come closer. He just watched her. Elena closed the car door gently and leaned against it for a moment, studying him. She remembered the moment at the repair yard, the way he had looked at her then. Not desperate, not hopeful, just waiting. As if he had already decided something. "You could have left," she murmured. The dog blinked once, that was all. Elena pushed herself off the car and walked toward him slowly. Careful, not wanting to startle him. He didn't retreat, didn't step forward either, just held his ground. When she was a few feet away, she stopped. Up close, he looked thinner than she remembered. His ribs showed faintly beneath his coat. His paws were worn, the pads cracked from heat and rough ground. But there was something else, too. A stillness. Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from knowing exactly where you are. Elena crouched slightly, resting her hands on her knees. "You hungry?" she asked. The dog tilted his head just a fraction. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Elena stood again and walked back to the SUV. She opened the passenger door and reached inside her bag, pulling out a small package of crackers and a bottle of water. Not much, but it was something. She broke a cracker in half and tossed it gently onto the ground between them. The dog didn't move at first. He looked at it, then back at her, as if waiting for permission. Elena nodded once. "Go ahead." He stepped forward slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. He lowered his head, sniffed the piece, then picked it up gently. No snapping, no rush. He chewed it slowly. Watched her the entire time. Elena sat down on the edge of the SUV's open door and took a sip of water. "You don't act like a stray," she said after a moment. The dog finished the first piece and looked at her again. She tossed another. Same reaction. Careful. Controlled. Not desperate. She studied him for a long time. There was something about him that didn't match the story she'd been told. Dogs left behind usually behave differently. Nervous, jumping, hungry in a way that bordered on frantic. This one wasn't like that. He was thin, but not broken. "You had a name once," she said quietly. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. Elena looked out across the land, then back at him. "Can't just keep calling you dog, can I?" She let the silence sit for a moment, then nodded to herself. "Ranger," she said. The word felt right as soon as it left her mouth. Simple. Steady. She watched him closely. There it was. A small shift, barely noticeable, but real. His ears lifted just slightly higher, his posture adjusted. Not dramatic, just aware. Elena felt something in her chest move. Not big, not overwhelming, just enough to notice. "Ranger," she said again, softer this time. He didn't come to her, but he didn't look away either. That was enough. The sun climbed higher, the heat building steadily across the land. Elena stood and picked up her suitcase, carrying it toward the structure. Ranger followed. Not close, but not far. Every step she took, he mirrored, 5 or 6 feet behind, silent, watchful. When she reached the door, she paused. Her hand hovered over the wood. For a second, she hesitated. Then she pushed it open. The hinge let out a low, tired creak. Inside, the air was cooler. Dim. Dust hung in the light that filtered through the cracks in the walls. The floor was uneven, scattered with debris. Old boards, rusted nails, forgotten tools. Elena stepped in slowly. The sound of her shoes against the floor echoed faintly. Behind her, Ranger stopped at the threshold. He didn't enter. She glanced back. He stood there just outside, his body still, his eyes fixed on the interior. Watching. Waiting. Elena didn't call him in, didn't push. She turned back to the room and set her suitcase down. The silence inside felt different than the silence outside. Heavier, older, as if it had been waiting longer. She moved carefully, brushing dust from a nearby surface with her hand. Her fingers came away coated in a fine layer of gray. This place hadn't been touched in years, maybe longer. Behind her, Ranger remained at the door, still, present, like a quiet promise that she wasn't entirely alone out here. Elena took a slow breath and looked around the space again. "This'll take time," she murmured. Ranger didn't respond, but he didn't leave. And for the first time since she stepped onto that land, that felt like something. The morning passed slower than she expected, not in a bad way, just stretched. Elena moved through the structure carefully, as if every step might disturb something that had been resting there too long. Dust rose in soft clouds with each shift of her foot, catching the light that slipped through the cracks in the walls. The air smelled old, dry wood, rust, faint traces of something burned long ago. She opened the suitcase and pulled out a rag, a small bottle of cleaner, and a pair of worn gloves. Nothing fancy, just what she had. She started with the nearest surface, a narrow wooden table pushed against the wall. One slow swipe, gray streaks, another. The wood underneath it began to show, darker than she expected, solid. "Not as bad as it looks," she murmured. Behind her, Ranger shifted. She glanced over her shoulder. He hadn't come inside, still standing at the doorway, exactly where she'd left him, watching, always watching. Elena straightened and wiped her hands on her jeans. "You planning on staying out there all day?" Ranger blinked. That was all. She gave a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh, then turned back to her work. The hours moved quietly. She cleared one corner of the room, then another. Stacked broken boards outside. Gathered rusted nails into a small tin she found beneath a shelf. The rhythm helped. Move, wipe, carry, set down, repeat. It kept her from thinking too much, but not completely. Her father's tools were still there, hanging on the wall near the back. A hammer with a worn wooden handle, a set of wrenches arranged by size, a rusted level with faded markings. She stopped in front of them, reached out, ran her fingers lightly over the handle of the hammer. He used to stand just like this, right here, checking things, fixing things, quiet most of the time. He never explained much, just did the work. Elena swallowed and stepped back. "Guess I'm doing it now," she said under her breath. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the walls with a low, steady sound. Ranger lifted his head. His body stiffened. Elena noticed. "What is it?" He didn't bark, didn't move forward, just turned his head slightly toward the open land, ears forward, listening. Elena stepped toward the door, standing just behind him. The desert stretched out, unchanged. Nothing moved. No cars, no people, just wind. After a moment, Ranger relaxed again, lowering his head slightly, though his eyes stayed alert. Elena studied him. "You hear things I don't," she said softly. He didn't answer, but she knew she was right. She went back inside. The light shifted as the afternoon passed. Warmer, deeper, shadows stretching longer across the floor. By late afternoon, one side of the room looked different. Not clean, but usable. The table cleared. A small space swept free of debris. Her suitcase pushed neatly against the wall. Elena stood there, hands on her hips, breathing slowly. It wasn't much, but it was something she had done. With her own hands, she stepped outside. The heat had softened slightly, though the ground still held the day's warmth. The sky had begun to change, soft oranges blending into pale blues. Ranger sat a few feet from the doorway now, closer than before. Still not inside, but closer. "You're getting there," she said. He glanced at her briefly, then back at the horizon. Elena walked a few steps out, stretching her back. The land felt different in the evening, not friendlier, but less harsh. The edges softened. The silence didn't press as hard. She turned slowly, taking it all in. This was it. No neighbors, no noise, no one expecting anything from her. The thought landed quietly, not heavy, just there. A distant howl broke the stillness. Low, sharp. Elena froze. Ranger was already on his feet. Every muscle in his body tightened. His ears snapped forward, eyes fixed in the direction of the sound. Another howl. Closer this time. Coyotes. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. She stepped back toward the structure instinctively. Ranger moved with her, not behind, beside, positioned slightly between her and the open land. She noticed that, didn't say anything. The howling faded after a few moments, replaced again by the steady sound of wind. Ranger didn't relax right away. He stood there, watching, guarding. Only after a long minute did his posture ease slightly. Elena exhaled slowly. "Guess we're not alone out here," she said. Ranger glanced at her, then sat down again, but closer this time, just a few feet away, not touching, not quite, but close enough. The sun dipped lower, painting the land in deep gold. Elena went back inside to grab her bag, then returned to the SUV. She moved slower now, tired, not just physically, but the kind of tired that settles into your bones after a long day of holding everything together. She set up the same way as the night before. Seat adjusted, bag within reach, water bottle on the console. Through the windshield, she could see the structure, the open door, the space she had cleared, and Ranger. He didn't go far. He settled near the entrance again, lowering himself onto the ground with a quiet exhale. Facing outward. Watching. Elena leaned back in her seat. For a long time, she just looked at him, at the way he stayed, didn't wander, didn't disappear into the dark. Just stayed. The sky darkened slowly. Stars appeared again, one by one. The wind softened, and the land settled into night. Elena closed her eyes, not as tightly as the night before, not as uncertain. Outside, Ranger remained awake, still, listening, and somewhere in that quiet, without anything needing to be said, she began to understand what it meant to stay. Morning came sharper this time, not gentle like the day before. The sun rose fast, spilling light across the land in a way that left no shadows to hide in. Heat followed close behind, pressing into the ground, into the air, into everything. Elena woke before she was ready. Her neck ached less, but her body still carried the weight of yesterday. She sat up slowly, blinking against the brightness, and rubbed her eyes. For a moment she stayed in the car, listening. Wind, a faint rustle. Nothing else. She turned her head toward the structure. The door was still open. And Ranger. He wasn't there. Elena straightened. Her eyes moved across the ground, scanning. No movement. No shape in the usual spot. A small tension settled into her chest. "Ranger?" she called softly. Her voice didn't carry far. The land swallowed it quickly. She opened the door and stepped out, the heat already rising from the ground beneath her feet. "Ranger." This time, louder. Still nothing. She walked toward the structure first, checked inside. Empty. The space she had cleared looked exactly the same. Still. Untouched. No sign of him. Elena stepped back outside and turned slowly in place. The land stretched out in every direction, unchanged, flat, quiet, too quiet. She took a few steps forward, scanning the brush, the low dips in the ground, the edges where the land began to slope slightly. Then she saw him, at the far end of the property, standing still, farther than he had gone before. Elena exhaled. "Ranger." He didn't turn, didn't react. He stood with his body angled slightly downward, head lowered, as if focused on something just beneath the surface. Elena began walking toward him, not rushing, just steady. The ground grew rougher as she moved farther from the structure. Small rocks pressed under her shoes. Dry grass brushed against her ankles. Ranger still didn't move. When she got closer, she could see the shift in him. His body wasn't relaxed. It was locked. Tight. Every muscle engaged. "What is it?" she asked quietly. No response. He took one step forward. Then another, then stopped again. His front paws pressed into the dirt. And then he started digging. Not fast. Not wild. Precise. Each movement deliberate, as if he already knew exactly where to place his paws. Dirt pushed backward in controlled arcs, falling behind him in a growing line. Elena frowned slightly. "Hey, easy." She stepped closer. He didn't stop. Didn't even slow. His focus didn't break. "Ranger." Still nothing. The sound of his paws against the ground changed as he dug deeper. At first, soft and dry, then heavier, thicker, like the soil was different beneath the surface. Elena watched him, her unease growing. This wasn't normal. Dogs dug all the time, but not like this, not with this kind of purpose. He wasn't searching, he was uncovering. "All right, that's enough," she said, reaching out slightly. The moment her hand came near his shoulder, he stopped. Immediately, as if someone had flipped a switch. He stepped back, sat down, and looked at her directly. Elena froze. The shift was too clean, too controlled. She lowered her hand slowly. "What are you doing?" Ranger didn't move, didn't blink, just held her gaze. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward the ground, the spot he had been digging. Elena followed his eyes. The shallow hole wasn't deep, just a few inches. But the dirt inside looked different, darker, packed. She crouched down slowly, brushed away a bit of loose soil with her fingers. It felt firmer beneath the surface, not like the dry, loose ground around it. She pressed her palm flat against it. Cooler. That caught her attention. The rest of the ground was already warming under the sun. But this held a different temperature. Elena sat back on her heels, studying the spot. Ranger remained still, watching her, waiting. "You found something?" she murmured. She reached forward again, this time digging lightly with her fingers. The soil resisted more than she expected, packed tight, like it had been pressed down. On purpose. A small flicker of unease moved through her. She grabbed a nearby stick and began scraping at the surface. Slow, careful. The dirt gave way bit by bit. A few inches down, the stick struck something, a dull sound, not rock, not quite metal, but solid. Elena paused. Her hand tightened around the stick. She tapped it again. Same sound. Hollow. Ranger shifted slightly behind her. Not forward, not closer. Just enough to remind her he was there. Elena brushed more dirt aside with her hands now, working faster despite herself. The shape beneath began to form. Flat, even, not natural. Her breath slowed. "What is this?" she whispered. She cleared a wider area. The surface beneath was smooth. Not stone. Not wood. Something else. Her fingers traced the edge of it. Straight line. Too straight. The kind that didn't belong to the land. She sat back again, staring at it. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something close. Something that didn't quite have a name. Behind her, Ranger stood up again, but he didn't step forward. He stayed where he was. At a distance now. Watching her. Not the ground. Her. Elena turned slightly, looking at him. "You knew this was here," she said softly. He didn't respond, but he didn't look away. She turned back to the ground. The wind moved across the land, lifting small trails of dust around her. The hole. The shape beneath it. The way Ranger had found it. None of it felt accidental. She reached out one more time, brushing the dirt back just enough to expose more of the surface. Flat. Cold. Waiting. Elena sat there in the rising heat, her hands covered in dust, her eyes fixed on what lay beneath. And for the first time since she arrived, the land didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like something had been waiting, buried, silent. Until now. Elena didn't move for a long time. She stayed there on her knees, hands resting in the dirt, staring at the edge of something that didn't belong to the desert. The wind passed over her again, lifting a thin veil of dust across the ground. It settled quickly, like it always did, trying to cover what had been disturbed. But it didn't hide it. Not anymore. Elena exhaled slowly, then reached forward. Her fingers brushed the surface again, cool, smooth, unyielding. She pressed harder this time, feeling for any give. There was none. Whatever it was, it had been placed there. Not dropped, not natural. Placed. She sat back and looked around. The land stretched out the same way it always had. Dry, open, still. No signs, no markers. Nothing to suggest something had been hidden here. Nothing, except the way Ranger had found it. Elena turned toward him. He stood several feet away now. Not close. Not touching the edge of the hole. Watching. Alert. "You don't want to come near it," she said quietly. Ranger's ears shifted slightly, but he didn't step forward. Didn't step back either. Just held his distance. Elena wiped her hands on her jeans and pushed herself to her feet. Her knees protested slightly, but she ignored it. She needed tools. This wasn't something she could uncover with her hands. She walked back toward the structure, moving faster than before. Ranger followed, but again, not too close to the spot. He circled slightly, keeping distance from the area, then fell in beside her as she moved away. The shift didn't go unnoticed. Inside the structure, Elena went straight to the wall where the tools hung. Her father's tools. She stood there for a second, looking at them again. At the way they had been arranged. Carefully. Intentionally. Not thrown together. Not forgotten. She reached for the shovel first. The metal head was worn, but solid. The wooden handle smooth from years of use. Her father's hands had held this. That thought came quietly, without weight, just present. She took the shovel and turned back toward the door. Ranger stepped aside to let her pass. They walked back together. The sun was higher now, the heat stronger, pressing down across the land. Elena returned to the spot. The hole looked smaller from a distance, less significant, but up close. It pulled at her attention again. She drove the shovel into the ground beside the exposed surface. The soil resisted at first, packed tight, then gave. She worked slowly, carefully. Each scoop revealing more of the shape beneath. Dirt piled up behind her, forming a small ridge. Sweat gathered along her neck, her arms, her back. She didn't stop, didn't rush either, just steady. Ranger stayed a few feet away, pacing occasionally, then stopping again. Always watching. After several minutes, the edges began to form more clearly. Straight lines. Corners. Elena paused. Her breath heavier now. She brushed away loose dirt with her hand. A rusted edge came into view. Metal. There was no mistaking it now. She leaned closer, clearing more with careful movements. The surface expanded, flat, wide, larger than she expected. Her pulse picked up slightly. "What were you doing out here?" she murmured, not entirely sure who she was asking. Her father. The thought surfaced without warning. She sat back on her heels again, staring at the shape. Memories came, uninvited. His long absences. The way he would leave early, return late, sometimes not saying where he'd been. The way he avoided certain questions, not dismissive, just quiet, like the answers didn't belong to anyone else. She had stopped asking eventually. Life had gotten busy. Marriage, work, time had filled in the spaces. And now, she looked back down at the ground, at the metal, the shape beneath it. "You knew," she whispered. The words felt strange in her mouth. Not accusing. Not yet. Just uncertain. She shook her head slightly and reached for the shovel again. More dirt. More clearing. The outline grew clearer with each movement. A large metal plate. Set into the earth. Not just resting there. Embedded. Anchored. Elena moved to one side, working along the edge. Her shovel struck something harder this time. A dull, metallic sound. She stopped, listened, then tapped it again. Same sound. Hollow beneath. Her breath slowed. She knelt again, brushing dirt aside more carefully now. The corner came into view, and with it, a seam. A narrow line where the metal met itself. Not a solid plate. A door. Elena pulled her hand back instinctively. Her heart beat louder now. Not fast, but heavier. Ranger let out a low sound behind her. Not a bark, not a growl. Something quieter. A warning. She turned toward him. He stood rigid again. Focused. But not on the land this time. On her. As if waiting. As if measuring. "You don't like this," she said softly. Ranger didn't move. Didn't relax. Just stayed ready. Elena turned back to the ground. Her hands hovered over the metal, then lowered slowly. She traced the seam again, followed it to the center. And there, a recessed handle, covered in dirt, nearly invisible until now. Her breath caught slightly. She sat back, her hands resting on her thighs. The wind passed again, the same steady sound, but it felt different now. Closer, heavier. The land wasn't empty anymore. It held something. Something that had been placed here long before she arrived. Something her father had never spoken about. Something Ranger had found. Elena wiped her hands slowly, her eyes never leaving the hatch. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, she looked out across the land, the horizon, the open sky, as if expecting something to change. Nothing did. The desert stayed the same, silent, still. But beneath her feet, that silence had been broken, and there was no putting it back. Elena stayed there a long moment, kneeling in the dirt, hands still, eyes fixed on the metal handle. The wind moved past her again, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It didn't feel empty. It felt like something had shifted beneath the surface, like the land itself was holding its breath. She exhaled slowly, then leaned forward. Her fingers brushed the handle, clearing away the last layer of dust. It was colder than the rest of the metal, solid, heavy, unused, for a very long time. Behind her, Ranger shifted again, not closer, still at that same distance, watching, always watching. "You don't have to come," she said quietly, not turning. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. She wrapped her fingers around the handle, paused, then pulled. At first, nothing. The metal didn't move. It held its place like it had no intention of giving anything back. Elena tightened her grip and pulled again, harder. A low sound answered her, not loud, just a deep, reluctant groan, metal against metal, seals breaking after years of holding tight. The handle lifted slightly, then stopped. Elena adjusted her position, planting one foot more firmly in the ground. She pulled again, this time using more of her weight. The hatch shifted, just enough to break whatever had kept it sealed. A rush of air followed, cold, dry. It rose up from below like something that had been trapped and finally released. Elena flinched slightly, not from fear, from surprise. The air smelled different, not rot, not decay, just old, still, untouched. She pulled again. The hatch lifted slowly, inch by inch, revealing darkness beneath. The sound of it opening echoed faintly into the space below, then faded. Elena held it open long enough to wedge a rock beneath the edge, keeping it from falling shut again. Then she leaned forward and looked inside. A ladder, metal, descending straight down into shadow. The light from above barely reached the bottom, but she could make out the shape of a floor. Flat, even, concrete. Her breath slowed. "This isn't," she whispered. She didn't finish the thought, because she didn't know what it was. Behind her, Ranger let out another low sound. She turned slightly. He hadn't moved closer. If anything, he'd taken a step back, his posture rigid again, alert, but not toward the land this time, toward the opening. He didn't want to go down there, that much was clear. Elena looked back at the ladder, then at the ground around her, then out at the open land. There was no one else, no sound, no movement, just her and whatever was beneath that hatch. She stood slowly, walked back toward the structure. Ranger followed this time, staying close as she moved. Inside, she went to her bag and pulled out the small flashlight she'd packed. It wasn't new, but it worked. She checked it. A thin beam cut through the dim space. Good enough. She grabbed a cloth, wiped her hands quickly, then turned back toward the door. Ranger stepped aside again, watching her. "You don't like this," she said. He didn't respond. She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. "Neither do I." Then she walked back out. The heat had settled deeper now, pressing down across the land. The air shimmered slightly above the ground. The hatch waited where she had left it. Open. Dark. She approached it slower this time, every step more deliberate. When she reached the edge, she crouched and shined the flashlight down into the opening. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing more. Concrete walls. Smooth. Uncracked. A small room. Not large, but built. Carefully. Deliberately. There were shapes inside. Boxes. A table. Something covered in cloth. Her pulse picked up. Not fast, but steady. Heavy. She shifted the beam again, scanning the space. No movement. No signs of animals. No collapse. Everything looked intact. She sat back slightly, considering, then stood. Moved one foot toward the ladder. Stopped. Listened. The wind above. The silence below. Ranger remained behind her. Not coming closer. Not interfering. Just present. Elena placed one foot on the top rung. Tested it. Solid. She gripped the sides of the ladder and began to descend. Slow. Careful. Each step measured. The temperature dropped almost immediately. Cooler air wrapped around her as she moved down, replacing the dry heat above. Her shoes touched the floor. Concrete. Smooth. She stepped off the ladder and turned slowly, raising the flashlight. The room came into full view. It was smaller than it had seemed from above, but more complete. Concrete walls on all sides. No cracks, no signs of damage. A single metal table stood against one wall. 3 wooden crates stacked neatly beside it. A tarp-covered shape in the corner. Everything arranged. Nothing scattered. Nothing abandoned in a rush. This had been built to last. Elena took a step forward. The sound echoed faintly. Too clean. Too contained. Her breath felt louder here. She moved toward the table. The flashlight beam landed on something resting at the center. A box. Metal. Rectangular. Closed. No rust. No dust thick enough to hide it completely, as if the air itself had protected it. Elena stopped just short of it. Her hand hovered near the surface. She didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, she turned slowly, taking in the rest of the room again, trying to understand, trying to place it. Nothing about this matched the life she had known. Not her father's quiet routines. Not the land above. Not anything she had been told. And yet, it was here. Waiting. Ranger let out a faint sound from above. Elena looked up instinctively. The light from the opening framed him at the top. He stood at the edge, looking down, but not moving. Not coming. Just watching her from above. Like a guard who knew where the line was. Elena turned back to the room, to the box, to the quiet that lived here. She took one more step forward, and this time, she reached out, ready to find out what had been left behind. Her fingers rested on the metal box, cool, smooth, not like the rusted hatch above. This had been protected, preserved. Elena stood there for a moment, her hand unmoving, as if the simple act of opening it might change something she wasn't ready to face. The air in the room felt still. Watching. Waiting. She let out a slow breath and slid her fingers along the edge of the lid. There was no lock, no keyhole, just a simple latch. Her thumb pressed against it. A soft click. The sound echoed faintly in the small space. Then silence again. Elena hesitated one last second, then lifted the lid. It opened without resistance. Inside. Paper. Stacks of it. Neatly arranged. Bound in folders. No dust. No decay. Just waiting. Elena leaned closer, the beam of the flashlight steady in her hand as she scanned the contents. Documents. Not random. Organized. Intentional. She set the flashlight down on the table, angling it so the light spread across the surface, and reached in carefully. The first folder was thick. She pulled it out slowly, setting it on the table. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt tight. She opened it. Maps. Large ones, folded precisely. She spread one open. Lines, coordinates, sections marked in red ink, numbers written in a neat, familiar hand. Her father's handwriting. Elena froze. She knew it immediately, even after all these years. The same careful lettering he used when labeling tools, writing notes, leaving instructions. She ran her fingers lightly over the edge of the page. "You did this," she whispered. The realization settled slowly. He hadn't just owned this land. He had studied it, measured it, mapped it. Elena turned the page. More markings, more notes. References she didn't fully understand. Aquifer lines, depth measurements, flow directions. Her brow furrowed. Water. The thought came quietly, unexpected. She reached for another folder, opened it. Legal documents this time. Stamped. Signed. Dated decades ago. She leaned closer, reading carefully. Property rights. Access rights. Underground water rights. Her breath caught. She read the line again. Then again. The words didn't change. Her father's name, attached to claims beneath the surface. Claims that stretched beyond the visible land, far beyond it. Elena straightened slowly. Her eyes moved across the room again, as if something else might suddenly explain it. Nothing did. Only the quiet. Only the box. Only what had been left for her. She picked up another document. This one more recent. Not as old as the others. A printed report. Highlighted sections. Notes written in the margins she read slowly. Carefully. A development project. Nearby. Struggling. Water shortages. Delays. Costs rising. Her fingers tightened slightly on the page. She flipped back to the maps, then to the documents, then back again. The connection formed, clear, undeniable. The land above her. The worthless land Victor had dismissed without a second thought. It wasn't empty, it wasn't useless. It sat on something, something that had been planned for, protected, hidden. Her father hadn't just left her land. He had left her control over something people needed. Elena stepped back from the table. Her breath came slower now, deeper. The weight of it settled in stages. Not all at once, not overwhelming. Just undeniable. She looked up toward the opening. The light from above framed the ladder. Ranger stood there, still, watching. as if he had known all along that this was what lay beneath. "You brought me here," she said softly. He didn't move, but his presence felt different now. Not just a companion, not just something that stayed, something that led. Elena turned back to the table. Her eyes moved across the documents again. This wasn't luck. This wasn't an accident. Her father had built this, planned it, protected it, and never said a word. Not to her, not to anyone. She picked up one final folder, thinner, worn at the edges. Inside, a single page, handwritten. Her breath slowed. She recognized it immediately. Her father's handwriting again. But this time, different. Less precise, more personal. She didn't read it. Not yet. Her hand hovered over the page, then lowered it gently back into the folder. This wasn't something to rush. She closed the box slowly. The lid settled back into place with a quiet finality. The room seemed smaller now, not physically, but in the way it held everything together. The past, the secret, the truth of what had been buried here. Elena picked up the flashlight, turned toward the ladder. Each step back felt heavier, not from fear, from understanding. When she reached the top, she climbed out slowly, the heat of the desert hitting her again like a wall. The air felt different now, not empty, not quiet in the same way. Ranger stepped back to give her space as she emerged. His eyes stayed on her, reading her. She stood there for a moment, looking out across the land. The same land, unchanged, but not the same anymore. She knew what lay beneath it now. She knew what had been hidden. And more than that, she knew why. Elena let out a slow breath. Victor had taken everything. The house, the money, the life they built. But this, he had walked away from it, dismissed it, called it nothing. A pile of dirt. She looked down at the ground beneath her feet, then back out at the horizon. "No," she said quietly. Not angry, not bitter, just certain. It was never nothing. The wind moved across the land again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was carrying something forward. Something that had been waiting. Until she came back. The days that followed didn't feel real at first. Elena moved through them slowly, like someone adjusting to a new gravity. Morning came. Work followed. Then evening. Again and again. But something underneath had shifted. She started going inside the structure now, not just standing at the door. She cleared more space, swept the floors, opened the windows that still worked. The air inside changed, little by little, less stale, less forgotten. She carried water in from a supply she picked up on a short drive back toward the highway. Stocked simple food, a few essentials, nothing fancy, just enough. Ranger adjusted too. He still didn't like the underground room. That never changed. But he came inside the main structure now, stayed near the doorway at first, then closer. Eventually, he settled near the table she had cleared, always positioned where he could see both her and the land outside, guarding both. The hatch remained closed most of the time, covered lightly again, not hidden, but not exposed either. Elena went down there when she needed to read, to understand, to connect the pieces. The documents made more sense each day. Water rights, legal claims, access points. Her father had done everything properly, quietly, carefully, years ahead of anything happening around it. The development project mentioned in the reports. She found more about it on her phone when she had signal. A large expansion, Residential, commercial, and struggling. Delays tied to water access, permits stuck, costs rising. She read the articles twice, then a third time. Each time the same conclusion settled deeper. They needed what was under her land, and they didn't have it. Elena didn't rush, didn't call anyone, didn't announce anything. She just stayed, observed, listened, learned. Until one afternoon, a car appeared on the road. Not common, not out here. Elena saw the dust trail first, thin at the horizon, then growing, moving closer. Ranger was already on his feet, body tight, ears forward, a low sound rumbling in his chest. Elena stepped outside. The sun was high, the light sharp against the land. She raised a hand to shield her eyes. The vehicle came into view. Black, clean, out of place. Her stomach tightened before her mind caught up. She knew that car. It slowed as it approached the property, then stopped, a few yards away. The engine cut, silence followed. The door opened. Victor stepped out. He looked the same, and not. Pressed shirt, dark slacks, shoes that didn't belong on this ground. But his posture, there was something different, less certain. He glanced around first, taking in the land, the structure. Then his eyes landed on her. Elena. His voice carried across the space. Familiar. Too familiar. She didn't move closer. Didn't step back either. Just stood where she was. Ranger shifted slightly in front of her. Not aggressive, but present, clear. Victor noticed. His gaze flicked down to the dog, then back to her. "That's new," he said. Elena didn't respond. He took a few steps forward, careful with his footing, like the ground might reject him if he moved too quickly. "I wasn't sure you'd come out here," he continued. "But I heard—" He stopped, adjusted his tone. "I heard you were here." Elena crossed her arms lightly. "And?" Victor exhaled. His eyes moved again, across the structure, the land, the edges of the property, then back to her. "There's been some talk," he said, "about this place." She didn't react. "About something on the land," he added. Still nothing. Victor stepped closer. Ranger's body tensed. Just enough. Victor noticed that too. He stopped again. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," he said, quieter now. Elena finally spoke. "Then why did you come?" The question hung between them. Simple. Direct. Victor hesitated. That alone felt unfamiliar. "I think we should talk," he said. "We are talking." He shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. "Elena, if there's something here, something valuable, you shouldn't be handling it alone." There it was. The tone. Not concern. Not really. Something else. Measured. Careful. Like he was stepping into something he didn't fully understand. "I'm managing," she said. Victor nodded slowly. "I'm sure you think you are. But these things, they get complicated. Legal issues. Ownership. Claims." Elena watched him. Really watched him this time. The way his eyes moved. The way he chose his words. Not once had he asked how she was. Not once. "You didn't think it was worth anything before," she said quietly. Victor paused. "That was before I had all the information." Elena let that sit, The wind moved between them, carrying dust across the ground. Ranger didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there. Victor glanced at the dog again, then back at her. "I'm trying to help you," he said. "No," Elena replied. Calm, steady. "You're trying to get back in." The words landed clean. No edge, no anger, just truth. Victor opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment he didn't have anything to say. That, more than anything, told her everything she needed to know. "Elena," he tried again, softer now. "We spent 33 years together." She nodded. "Yes. And that doesn't count for something." She held his gaze. It did. The past tense hung heavy. Victor looked down briefly, then back up. "This doesn't have to be like this," he said. Elena studied him for a long second, then shook her head. "It already is." The silence stretched. Longer this time. Different. Victor shifted again, the confidence he walked in with slipping just enough to show. He glanced around once more, at the land, at the structure, at everything he had dismissed. Then back at her. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Elena didn't respond right away. She let the words settle. Then, "No," she said, soft, certain. "I'm not." Ranger stepped forward slightly. Not enough to threaten, just enough to close the space. Victor noticed. He took a small step back. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. Elena saw it, and something inside her settled. Final. "You should go," she said. Victor stood there a moment longer, as if waiting for something to change. It didn't. Finally, he nodded. Once, short. Then turned. Walked back to the car. The door closed. The engine started. And just like that, he was gone. The dust trail faded slowly behind him. The land returned to stillness. Elena stood there, watching the empty road long after he disappeared. Ranger remained beside her, close, present. She let out a slow breath. Not relief, not tension, something clearer. She turned back toward the structure, toward the land, toward everything that had been left behind. And for the first time since that office in San Antonio, she didn't feel like anything had been taken from her. She felt like something had been revealed. The weeks passed quietly, not empty, not slow in the way they had been before, just steady. Elena settled into a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Mornings began early, the sun rising over the flat horizon, light stretching across the land before the heat followed. She would step outside with a cup of coffee, stand near the edge of the property, and watch the day arrive. Ranger was always there, a few steps ahead, or just behind. Never far. He had claimed the land in his own way, walking the perimeter each morning, pausing at certain spots, listening, checking, especially the place where he had dug. He always stopped there. Not long, just enough, as if confirming something still existed beneath the surface. Elena noticed that. She noticed everything now. The way the wind changed direction in the late afternoon, the way the ground held warmth even after the sun dropped, the faint sounds that carried across the open distance at night. She moved inside the structure more each day. It became less of a shelter, more of a home. She patched what she could, replaced boards, cleared out the last of the debris. The table she had wiped clean became her space. Papers spread across it now, maps, documents, Notes she had begun making herself. She didn't rush the process, didn't call anyone immediately, but she didn't ignore it either. She made calls when she had signal, careful ones, quiet ones, a legal office in a nearby town, a water rights specialist, questions asked simply, answers received cautiously. Everything pointed the same way. What lay beneath her land mattered, more than most people would guess. She listened, took notes, then made her own decisions, always her own. Victor never came back, not after that day. A few calls came through at first. She didn't answer. Then messages, shorter each time. Then nothing. The silence between them became complete, and for once, it didn't feel heavy. It felt right. Evenings became her favorite time. The heat softened. The sky opened up in colors that changed slowly, like something being painted in real time. She would sit outside, sometimes on an old crate she'd dragged out, sometimes just on the ground. Ranger nearby, always nearby. One evening, he walked out farther than usual, toward the spot again. He paused there, stood still, then sat. Elena watched him from a distance. Something about the way he held himself hadn't changed since that first day. Alert, certain. She stood and walked over slowly. He didn't move when she approached, just shifted slightly to make space beside him. She looked down at the ground. Nothing visible now. The dirt had settled again, the hatch covered, the land restored to its quiet surface. But she knew. She sat down beside him. The ground was still warm from the day. The air carried a soft breeze, enough to move a few strands of her hair across her face. She brushed them back absently. "You knew, didn't you?" she said quietly. Ranger turned his head slightly, not fully, just enough. She smiled faintly. "I wouldn't have found it without you." He blinked once, that same steady way. Elena looked out at the horizon. The sun was dropping lower now, turning the sky into something softer. The edges of the world blurred slightly in the distance, heat giving way to cool. She thought about everything that had happened. Not just the discovery, not just the land, but the way she had arrived here. What she had believed when she first drove away from that office. That she had nothing, that everything had been taken. She let out a slow breath. It didn't feel true anymore, not even close. Behind her, the structure stood solid, not perfect, but strong. Inside, the table held more than dust now. It held direction. The land stretched out around her, the same as it always had been, but no longer empty. Not to her. Ranger shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing against her leg. She rested her hand lightly on his back, felt the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Grounded, present, real. The sky darkened slowly, stars beginning to appear again, just like that first night. But this time, it didn't feel like she was passing through. She was part of it. Elena leaned back slightly, supporting herself with her hands in the dirt. "You know," she said softly, almost to herself, "I thought I was starting over." The wind moved gently across the land. No answer. But she didn't need one. She shook her head faintly. "No," she added after a moment. "That's not it." Ranger stayed still beside her. She looked down at the ground once more, at the place that had changed everything, then back up at the sky. "It was already here," she said. The words settled easily. No resistance, no doubt, just understanding. What she had lost was never the whole of her life. What remained was something deeper, something that had been waiting long before she ever needed it. Elena sat there, until the last light faded, until the stars filled the sky completely, until the air cooled enough to carry a different kind of quiet. Ranger stood first, stretched, then walked a slow circle before settling again near her. She followed his lead, pushed herself up carefully, turned toward the structure, toward the place she now called hers. The door stood open, light from inside spilling softly outward. She stepped forward. Ranger moved beside her, not behind, not ahead, together. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't walking away from anything. She was walking into something that had always been hers. She just hadn't known where to look. Until now. Elena stood there a moment longer than she needed to, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other still carrying the warmth of Ranger's fur. He didn't go inside right away. He turned his head once, back toward that spot in the dirt. The place he had stopped. The place he had refused to leave alone. Like he was checking it, one last time. Then he followed her in. That's when it settled. Not the land, not the papers, not even the quiet. It was the knowing that nothing had been taken from her that hadn't already been slipping away. That what stayed, what waited, was something nobody else had ever touched. She thought about the day in that office, the pen in her hand, the way everything was listed out, measured, signed away like it had a clear edge.
But this, that had never been part of it. Ranger had seen it first, not the value, not the future, just the place where something didn't feel right, and stay with it until it gave up its juice. Elena moved further inside. The floor steadied under her feet now, not unfamiliar anymore, not temporary. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had arrived at the end of anything. She felt like she had stepped into something that had been waiting for her to catch up. She reached down, resting her hand lightly on Ranger's back. "You knew?" she said quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Outside, the wind moved and brought the blanket again, same as before. Only now, it didn't sound empty. It sounded like something had finally been found. And maybe that's the part nobody tells you. Sometimes, the thing you think you lost was never where you were looking in the first place. So if you had walked away from everything you thought was yours, would you know where you stopped and start digging?